Hi, welcome to my interview today with two absolutely brilliant women who are introducing a new way to look at tourism and taking sustainable tourism to a whole new level. So my name is Gina Paladini. I'm the marketing director at Tomahawk here in New Zealand. And I have the privilege of talking to Anna Pollock and Michelle Holiday about regenerative tourism. So we're all aware that tourism is a beautiful way to change the world by people traveling and experiencing different destinations and different cultures, which hopefully opens up perspective and makes the world a better place that way. But what's been happening is more and more people are traveling every year, and we've got these hot spots in the world. We have Venice, we have even Mount Everest, which are experiencing what is now called over-tourism. So there's lots of talk about sustainable tourism, but what Anna and Michelle talk about is really looking at it a different way and bumping it up another level, and it's called regenerative tourism. And I am absolutely thrilled and honored. I know I've said it once, but I'm going to say it again, to be speaking to them both today about this new way of looking at tourism. So who are these intelligent women? So Anna Pollock, she's from England, so she's talking to us today from winter in England. She's got an extensive career as a researcher, strategist, and a change catalyst serving the international tourism and hospitality sector. She's passionate about its capacity to generate well-being, wealth, and welfare for people and places, provided that it's managed properly. She has been a change agent, and I've known Anna for 10 years when she was speaking about the conscious traveler. So this is this evolution that as a change agent, she brings to the world. And then my new friend, Michelle Holiday. Michelle's a consultant and facilitator, researcher, and writer. And she does her work centered around thrivability, which is a set of perspectives and practices based on a view of organizations and communities as dynamic, discovering ways that can feel more alive, connect more meaningfully with each other, and serve a more powerful and effectively as a collective active. Now, I really got that messed up, Michelle, so I apologize. I'm gonna let you explain, obviously, in more detail how you're helping to change the world through tourism as a better place and really help communities. So we're gonna try and keep this short and sweet and make this an introduction for New Zealand, Australia, and throughout the South Pacific on your great work. So let's get right into it. Anna, why do we even need a change in tourism today?
Well, thank you very much for letting us chat about this important topic. You could say right now that tourism is having its annus horribilis, if you remember that expression my queen used a few years ago. It's a tough year. We've had tremendous problems with natural hazards, and we now have an issue around a pesky little virus called corona, who's showing us actually that while tourism is now one of the largest industries in the world, it's virtually in every nook and cranny of the planet, it has some real vulnerabilities as well. We've also had, over the last few years, evidence that success can actually hurt. We have places, as you pointed out, which have perhaps almost too many tourists at one time. We also have other parts of the world, and parts of the South Pacific certainly are in this category, where perhaps they don't attract as many visitors as they could or should. So the question is not only can we have less or more, it's just can we have the right kind of tourism. So the other issue really is that tourism is embedded in this entire economy and society, and we're facing a lot of change factors. Climate change is the biggest one, of course, and we're having now to recognize our contribution to that major issue. We're being affected by it. That's what's causing the hazards and so on, and adding to our vulnerability. We're looking at major economic issues around wealth disparity. We depend on people with disposable income. Technology is another external change factor that's causing us to think differently. We've been proud to say that the sector's generated a lot of jobs. But have you noticed how much automation is now coming into tourism? And maybe we need to look at the impact of that. So there are these external factors, if you like, that require us to change. There are some internal factors as well, and one of them is that we're getting increasing evidence that while we've grown in number, we're not necessarily producing the same amount of value that we used to. The cost of travel is constantly being pushed downwards by the system that we have. And the net benefit to communities, host communities who have to bear the costs associated with accommodating visitors, are going up as we're asking them to manage more, reduce the impact, and so on and so on. And then the third factor really for why we need to change is the customers changing as well. We all are becoming much more aware of the vulnerability of planet Earth and are looking for companies that are showing a degree of responsibility. So you can see from those just very quick factors, perhaps why we need to have take time for a good think about, are we doing the right thing?
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Okay, so how do we get there? What does this transition to regenerative tourism look like?
Well, maybe I can get us started along those lines, and maybe I can comment first a little bit on how Anna and I came to join forces in this. I've been focused for the past 20 years on the larger transition that humanity is going through from a story or a worldview in which we understand everything in the world as a machine, and we understand ourselves as parts within the machine. So in the context of tourism, I often talk about how we see tourism as if it's a conveyor belt. You know, we just want to get as many people onto the conveyor belt and churn them through as possible. And that kind of a story and a perspective is present throughout society, and it's at the root of every problem that we face in tourism, in education, in healthcare, in our own lives. And so about 20 years ago, I started to explore an alternative story, or a bigger story, at least more to the story, that there must also be life. There must also be aliveness in our communities, in our organizations. And if so, could we align with life's core principles and help to regenerate the life in our communities, to heal and to enable more vitality and more aliveness? I talk about thriving, and in fact, thrivability as a synonym to regeneration. How do we create the conditions to thrive? Is the internet connection okay? Should I repeat something? I went in and out. Okay, so where did you lose me?
Right when you started talking about thriving.
Thriving. Oh darn. Okay.
Okay, we'll edit it.
Okay. So I talk also about thriving, and in fact, thrivability, and our imperative to create the fertile conditions for life to thrive, to set that as our clear intention in our work in tourism, in every industry, in every aspect of our lives. And so this is another way of thinking about regenerative tourism, that we set the informed intention to enable life to thrive, not to see ourselves and those that we're hosting as just parts in the machine, but to see that the whole living system that we are stewarding, that we are cultivating and caring for.
Yeah. Got goosebumps. Okay, so how do we get there? You talk about community. I'm going to make the jump that where does the indigenous native people sit in this regenerative tourism process?
Well, I think I'll chip in a bit here because I've been having to think a lot about the how. Obviously, I've spent time talking about the why. But one of the things that really, first of all, what differentiates this regenerative approach from a sustainable approach? And I think you summed it up at the beginning. Sustainability is actually about doing less harm, but it's sustaining an existing model. And as Michelle has just said, that model is based on a whole pile of assumptions and beliefs about how the world works, that it is a machine and we're machines. What we're saying is that's not the case. And in fact, nature is constantly now trying to tell us in its own language that it's alive and it's trying to cope with our involvement, but we're not separate from it. So so there are a number of features, I guess, about the regenerative approach. One, it sees the world and the systems that we live in and ourselves as people as living systems. So it really is, as Michelle said, about how do we keep things alive and vital. And I think you'd probably agree that some of our a tendency is to, when we automate everything and we have machines for everything, again, there is a sterility in that kind of tourism. It becomes a focus on a transaction rather than a meaningful and magical and enchanting encounter between two people in a very special place. And when that happens, we lose the value of it. The visitor doesn't get the value and the host community doesn't get the same amount of value. Another real feature that's different is in the old model, it was a lot of top-down planning and campaigning and, in a sense, large agencies often telling local communities what was good for them. Where does the encounter take place? It just listen to the language. It takes place in a place. And the beauty of the living system approach is a recognition that in nature, every part of any living system is quite unique. So every individual in that system is unique. Every plant, every animal, every place is unique. And it's only in the sense of the setting, the place where this encounter takes place, that we can start to change things. So we have a lot of places in tourism. They're called destinations, and we have little lines around them and nice little pretty maps that we use to show, how we carve up the country. But the reality is, in those places are communities of people, the hosts, not just the suppliers of the services, but the people who are enjoying that place. And I guess one of the other distinguishing features of regenerative approach is that it all starts in places by building communities, collaborative communities. And as someone who's worked as long as me almost, I'm sorry to say it, in tourism, you will know just how competitive the suppliers can be, which makes no sense at all because the customer is affected by all of them. And we haven't actually understood that we're an ecosystem, not, as Michelle very capably put, a conveyor belt.
Right.
On a conveyor belt, the providers can be in a line. In the regenerative tourism, they're in a circle surrounding and supporting the visitor. So what we're trying to do is create means whereby those suppliers work together more effectively. Michelle, I don't want to hog the mic, as it were.
That's okay. I'll just add one thought to that, to what it will look like. And one of the things we talk about is the transition of destination marketing offices towards hosting the hosts, towards developing the capacity, the capability of those destinations, of those suppliers and those hosts to be in meaningful encounter, to understand the shared story that they are part of, to understand
this concept. I don't know how anybody could hear this and not feel
offering for the destination marketing offices.
Yeah, I don't know how anybody could hear this new concept and not feel that shift, and that, I mean, for me, and that's why I feel so privileged to talk to you guys today. For me, it feels like that, yes, that awe, that connection that this is the way that we have to go. I recently went to Angkor and felt like I was on a conveyor belt, where I'm in the largest place of worship in the world with all of this history, and you want to feel it and you want to learn and hear, and you're just like, nope, you go here, you go here, you can take your picture here, let me do this. So and as you said, Anna, the timing, we're seeing the need for this in so many ways. So tell me, because we want to wrap this up, what kind of programs do you offer tourism professionals? Because this is a shift in thinking, a shift in doing, a shift in how we communicate and connect with our communities and everything. What programs do you offer? How do we start this regenerative tourism?
Well, just before we go into that, there's one sort of point I think it's important to make, because a lot of the people listening to this and involved in tourism obviously are in the commercial, are in business. And many of them say, well, we love these nice concepts, but what does it do to my bottom line? And what is it at the destination? The DMO people are saying, where's the commercial side of this? And frankly, one of the key focuses of the work is that we do in fact need to significantly increase and improve the net benefit that tourism generates if we're going to continue to be an acceptable part of the social, mix of society. And I think that's where we've got to pay a lot more attention to reducing the costs, many of which we have not acknowledged we contribute to. So we're going to have to pay for the cost of what do we do with the carbon we generate, for example. But the key point is, how do we make sure that the spending that occurs in tourism benefits the destination that's hosting it? It's not just about bringing people together, it's bringing people together to create greater value. And so therefore you can't do that unless people are working collectively in a place to provide engaging, meaningful encounters between the guest and the host that actually add to that value.
So Anna, so that means we have to change the measurables, where everything in tourism was about counting international visitors versus domestic visitors, and now it's like counting the value per day of the visitor spend, because we're trying to get higher value. So what I'm hearing is you're talking about that we need to create new measurables. Is that correct? And
well, yes, unfortunately, yeah. I mean, everyone jumps to how are we going to measure this? We use these terms that Michelle has used. I use flourishing. I'm working with Flanders right now on this, and they've shifted their objectives from just volume growth to helping destinations, the businesses, and the people in them flourish, which is the same idea. And the reason for that is that, okay, how do you measure that? Well, in New Zealand's a great place to start this, really, because you already have a government that's saying it's not just about the numbers, it's about welfare, it's about well-being, it's actually about health. And what makes a person healthy, what makes a business healthy, it's never just one dimension. You don't maximize one variable. So somebody can be really extremely financially successful and utterly miserable and unhealthy. So similarly, as can communities, as can destinations, they can have a huge business going on there, but a lot of poverty that's not being addressed, a lot of residents feeling disenfranchised, etc. So I don't know if that answers that question, but I'd like now just to say what we're trying to do. We're suggesting that, how do you start the change? You start it in community. So, for example, we pull together the suppliers and the residents of a place. These are places where they've either got a challenge or a problem they want to overcome. Maybe they don't have enough visitors, or it could be that they have too many. It's about how do we get the right mix of visitor for this particular place. We start by saying, let's pull everyone together to really get to know one another and start to build that community bond that identifies really who we are. Because until we've actually got that perspective shared, we're just a bunch of individuals doing our own individual thing. So our program starts off by bringing people together to really look at who they are. And then we start to identify individuals that perhaps can really play a role in the act of stewarding or facilitating further conversations in that area. And then once they are in place, as it were, we then start to work with community participants on a learning journey, because you can't make these shifts overnight. You can't click a finger and say, change your mindset. That takes time. And it's the act of working together in community that really is what makes the difference. So I probably hogged the space there a little bit. Michelle, please chime in, because you've got so much to add here. She's my mentor in community facilitation.
It's wonderful. It's an emergent process of shared learning and discovery, bringing together essentially a community of practice within a place, within a community. This is the process that and the program that we're offering.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Beautiful.
I had to put on my glasses just to confirm. Anna, it's confirmed you are coming to New Zealand, being hosted by Bay of Plenty in March 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes,
so
I'm very excited. The Bay of Plenty are Kristen Dunn, the CEO there, and her team have been teaching themselves actually a huge amount about these regenerative concepts. We've only met relatively recently, but they've invited me down to work with them, and they're about to launch their new strategy where some of these regenerative principles are contained.
fantastic.
So I just want to salute them for that and thank them. And again, it's a slow process, but they're probably going to be one of the first.
May it be the first of many. Hey, just want to say thank you so much for your time today, for this beautiful and important new way at approaching tourism, approaching business, and hopefully this visit of you coming down, Anna, is the first of many, and we get you both down, and you, Michelle, from Canada, so that we can all learn more about regenerative tourism. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having us.
Gina. Thank you.
All right, cheers. Kia ora.